I recognise the honourable member, Stephen Browning.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm pleased to be able to speak to the Food Bill Committee whole of House stage. And in this part one, that is pretty broad, and I think we need to visit a few aspects of it. I think I'll just reflect on the broad level of agreement that has been arrived at in terms of this bill across the House. But in saying that, that does not mean the Green Party is happy with all aspects of the bill, not just this issue of country origin labelling, but other aspects as well. But we think there has been a reasonable move to accept some of our concerns and to address them. And in time, I would like to see further change to this bill. And I referred to it last night, that we actually do need a truly independent New Zealand Food Safety Authority, not just the one that we did have, but something much more genuinely independent. This bill goes a long way, and it's been mentioned about the purpose, or the new part to the purpose, that is to ensure that the bill is to maintain confidence in New Zealand's food safety regime. That's all about trade, that's all about external trade, and that's obviously important with 54% of agriculture being 54% of our export value. Absolutely critical. However, New Zealanders are being fed some very, very poor food, and this bill could deal with that, but won't necessarily. The bill is full of mays and possibilities. Minister may do this. The MPI may do that. But what we actually need is some serious compliance, and we need to be looking at what is in our food and who is measuring it and how they're measuring it. I've been involved around this issue for many years, more than a decade, looking at issues around pesticides in food, genetic modified foods and how that's coming into the country, issues around antibiotic resistance and that. The bill can address them all, but so could the Food Act, and successive governments have failed New Zealanders in the application of legislation and regulation to ensure the best food is going to them, their children, and in fact their unborn children as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing very good application and appropriate application to ensure this bill works well once it's through. There's been a fair bit of talk on country of origin labelling, and I'm sure we're going to address that several more times. And I was just taking some notes when the Minister was talking, and we've had some of these discussions before. I don't think it's right that we rely on the joint partnership, Minister. And I've just been reflecting on it a little bit over the last hour or so. The joint partnership with Australia, and it has some sense. You could say, we're a small country, Australia's a much bigger country, let's work together on food standards. But what we're getting from them, and what unfortunately the Minister is being advised about, is not necessarily good outcomes for New Zealanders. And I know that through and through on genetic engineering. I'm not sure when I'll do a speech on that through this course of what we're doing now, but I will. Yeah, and Ian McElvey is waiting for that level of detail, and I will promise you, Ian, I will give it to you.
Order, order. Member must use a member's full name or title.
Okay, Ian McElvey, I look forward to the Honourable Ian McElvey. I aim to have that very, very much clarified, not his name, but the issues around genetic modification and how the Minister is almost has her arm up her back to rubber stamp it because of the advice she's given and these trade imperatives that seem to overrule food safety for New Zealand consumers. Now, country of origin labelling comes into that turf to a degree too, but people want that Mr Chair.
The Honourable Member, Stephen
People
Browning.
want country of origin labelling for a range of reasons. Some of it will be food safety and their assumptions and ideas around what the food safety that's achieved from various countries. But others will be for a range of reasons about how that food is produced. Is it by a big agrochemical company? Is it because some rainforest has been slashed down? They don't want to get something from an area that's the food's been produced in that sort of area. Or even the parochial thing, do they want to look after New Zealand consumers and make sure that their food is consumed first? And I'll reflect on the pork industry. 45% of the pork, and I think it's more than that now, consumed in New Zealand comes from overseas. But the voluntary scheme and that the minister's referred to is not dealing with that. What pork do you see anyone in the House, any member, anyone that works in these buildings or in our communities, that is labelled with its country of origin, that it comes from Canada or maybe China or Australia or countries, in fact, that even have diseases that we should not be importing from into this country? And there's a number of consumers that would say, no, I don't want to contribute to that, but don't get the choice because, as it is, country of origin labelling is voluntary. There's nothing mandatory, and what is the backstop to that? There's no enforcement because it's voluntary. The only thing is, if a consumer can be absolutely sure that something's misrepresented, then they could go to the Commerce Commission through the one of the trade acts. We do need mandatory country of origin labelling. And I agree that the stuff through from the Trans-Tasman, the joint partnership stuff, is not maybe the clearest or the best method or form of that country of origin labelling. And the reason for that, and I agree with the Minister, there's a level of complexity, and that's why I think the supplementary order paper in my name is slightly superior to Labor's one, because it's relying on that system. They've got three parts to it. One, if it's imported, you actually label it for the country that it comes from. But then it's got this word or. Or, if you put a little bit of local stuff in there, you say local and imported goods, and it tells you nothing at that point. Or, it goes on again, you do a mix of imported product. But I might want to know the difference between Canada and Argentina for a range of reasons and perceptions. And it is a bit messy that way. So the supplementary order paper I've put up is talking about single ingredient, very, very clear, country of origin labelling in there. It goes further. It also said, wants a change in clause in 4E to require regular monitoring and enforcement of food labelling requirements. And there's very good reason for that, because the food labelling requirements that we have now, and GE is the one that I know so well, is not being enforced. Now, the bill does, and discussions with the Minister support that, and the bill does have some provisions that would suggest that there is a certain liability on the regulators to do that job. And maybe my supplementary order paper isn't needed, but we certainly see it as pretty needed, because that labelling I was just talking about has not been enforced, even monitored, since 2003. We're talking 11 years since a certain labelling requirement that is legally applicable has not even been monitored and enforced. So even if the Honourable Damien O'Connor's supplementary order paper or my one were to be agreed to, and I would really like the Minister to reconsider. Mr Chair? No. Come back.
I call the Honourable David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.